Hi, Nadine Briggs here from Simply Social Kids. Today I want to talk to you about a difficult topic of bullying. So I want to touch base a little bit on some of the elements about bullying that are really important to remember, and also give you a link to a book that I co-authored with Donna Shea called Bully Busting and Managing Meanies. That's a workbook for kids to really go through in much more detail what to do about bullying, what bullying is, what bullying isn't, all those sorts of things. But I just want to talk a little bit about some of the elements of bullying that are really, really important for parents to really understand if this is happening to their child. It's incredibly difficult because there's just a lot of fear around how to handle it in terms of involving adults or children handling it by themselves. All that sort of stuff is really difficult to figure out sometimes. So I just wanted to have a conversation about bullying and talk to you about some of the initial thoughts that we have. And again, go to the book and look at more detail in terms of what to do about bullying. And there are plenty of resources on the internet as well to help you with how to deal with it, as well as your school system. So the most important thing to really understand about bullying is that it's not just conflict. So what is bullying versus what bullying isn't, right? And bullying is when somebody is trying to diminish, hurt, harm somebody else repeatedly. They're not looking to repair any kind of argument. They don't want to be friends. They really want to make the other person feel diminished, sad, mad, isolated, all those things. They don't have good intent here. They do want to harm somebody in those ways. Now, physical bullying is a bit different in that that's assault. So the school should definitely get involved if there's physical bullying. They, depending on what the situation is, they might decide to involve law enforcement. Physically assaulting people is against the law. In many states, any kind of bullying is against the law. So how it's handled could vary depending on where you live as well. But what bullying isn't is just conflict between kids. There might be kids that just don't like each other, and they have repeated conflict because they just can't get along with one another. And if they're not trying to really exert power over the other or all of those things on a repeated basis, it's just that they don't get along, then they just don't get along. That's not necessarily bullying. It's just there's conflict between those kids, and they should probably choose to hang out with other kids that they enjoy more. Friends who get in conflict with each other, get in arguments, they might say, they might throw around the term bullying. And that's just conflict that needs to be resolved. So that's not bullying. It's just people who aren't getting along. They're having conflict and disagreements. And hopefully that gets repaired over time. Either they forget about it or somebody apologizes and they're able to move on from that. So that's not bullying. The kids that we work with have a hard time picking up on social cues, and they misread situations sometimes. So some kids will think that there's somebody being bullying them, or trying to wreck their stuff, or get involved in things that they shouldn't get involved in, when they're just misreading even people who are coming over to play with them. I've seen this with my own eyes at my center, where I had a boy one time playing with trains. He's building a train track, and he had in his own mind what he wanted to do, which a lot of our guys do. They have a set idea of what they want to do, and they're trying to execute that plan. Sometimes I'll think about it since the last time they're at our center. And so he's playing with the trains. Then somebody else comes over and wants to play trains with them. But the first boy takes it as, he's coming over to wreck my stuff, get away, I've got a plan, don't ruin it. He's reacting in that way because he doesn't see that that's friendship. Now, that's not a situation of bullying, but it's an example of where they're misinterpreting what's going on there. So if you get a child who is misreading maybe some sarcasm or maybe some teasing with smiles, so it's not meant to be hurtful, but there's joking around with somebody, they could be misinterpreting that and calling that bullying. So a lot of questions need to be asked, and you need to sort of do a little investigation around that. What really happened? What was the intent of the person? Do you notice if they were smiling or not smiling at you? Were they physically harming you or trying to hurt you, embarrassing you, all those types of things. So you have to kind of do an investigation to find out what's going on if your child has a history of not really reading those situations very well. So those are some important things to remember. So there are some steps that kids can take themselves that can start to get the bullying to stop. And most people who are bullying, they don't want any pushback of any kind from their victim. They don't want you to tell them to stop. They don't want you to take any action that's going to show strength on part of that victim. So I have to caveat this only if they feel safe to do so. I wouldn't do this in a crowd. I would just do it maybe with one person. I mean, not if a crowd is bullying them. I mean, certainly they can do it if other people are around, but if a crowd is bullying one child, that's a different situation. So I'm talking one-to-one. If there's one child who's bullying another child, letting them know that you want them to stop. So just saying, I want you to stop. And we practice this in our bullying prevention programs where we have them practice it. We don't want them to say it too quietly. We don't want to have it shouted at them, but we do want them to firmly say, no, I want this to stop. So just saying stop it can oftentimes be enough. It's shocking, I think, as somebody who works with kids, how often that actually really works, is they don't want you to push back on them at all. So when you do, they tend to stop. The other one is to just show them your best whatevs. Just like, I don't care what you think of me. You kind of put your hands up, or whatever. Kids sometimes have to practice that in a mirror to be able to get good at it. A lot of times their emotions are coming into play, and so it's hard for them to look that nonchalant way. So practicing that can really be helpful. But if someone's trying to get under your skin and they're trying to upset you or make you sad, and you're literally like, I don't care, that's a really effective way to get that person to stop, because they're not getting what they want. You just don't want to give them what they want. And what they're looking for is for you to be sad or mad, or to give them a big, juicy reaction. So the other strategy that we would suggest is have them pretend or imagine them being like an orange. Okay, so bear with me on this one. So let's say you have a child who tends to have big, juicy reactions to stuff, really explosive responses to things. Well, if that's the case and other kids start to pick up on the fact that your kid is the one who's going to have that explosive reaction, the chances are the other ones are going to do that even more, because they're going to find that explosive reaction to be entertaining. So the juice is inside that orange, but on the outside is that hard rind, right? So really helping them to understand, you need to show that rind, even if you have that juicy inside, right? You want to be explosive in the inside from what's going on, but keep it together. Keep that rind on the outside until you can go quietly, privately, away from everybody, feel your feelings. We do want them to feel their feelings. We're not trying to squelch any of that. We want them to go to a nurse, go to the bathroom, guidance counselor, someplace where it's out of view of the person who's trying to harm them, so they don't see that they got to them. Okay, and then they can process what's happened and talk to somebody about it and feel those feelings that they should, just to kind of let it all out and process the whole thing. But when they're with that person who's trying to hurt them, really imagine them being that orange. Another one that's really effective but very hard to do is to fight back with kindness. If someone's trying to make you feel sad, mad, upset, isolated, and you're nice to them, it's kind of just sort of a messing with their minds a little bit, right? They're like, wait a second, I'm saying all this mean stuff to you and you're being nice to me in return. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, it kind of throws them off their game. We had an example of a kid in our program who I'm so incredibly proud of. I hope his mom is watching, because I'm so proud of him, where he was being picked on by somebody, and he tried to connect with them over, I think it was like sneezing or something. They had one kid sneeze and the other kid sneezed, and they talked about gross sneezes with masks on or something like that. And they had a conversation, maybe I think it was about allergies around the sneezing. And so rather than saying, oh, I'm going to hate that kid, I'm never going to talk to that kid, I'm going to avoid that kid, he tried to connect with him around something that they had in common. Maybe they both have seasonal allergies or something. And it was a way for them to connect. Now, to be determined as to whether or not this child's going to still bully this other person, because it just happened like a week ago. But chances are he made inroads right there by doing that, by saying that and connecting with him on that, or any topic. If you connect to your bully in a kind way, compliment them on something, say good job or nice shot or whatever they're doing, and they'll be a little thrown off by that. And you never know, sometimes that can turn things around. Certainly telling them to stop, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is a really good way to do that. I know some situations where it's even telling them to stop has resulted in a friendship later on with that person. So the thing with bullies is bullies are kids too, and they can not be bullies anymore at some point, right? And so they may be friends down the road, and that does happen sometimes with kids. I wouldn't say that it happens all the time, but there are situations where that can happen. So the other tricky part is when do you involve an adult? Well, certainly if it's physical bullying, somebody's getting threatened physically on the playground or wherever, like that needs to have an adult intervention. When it's relational bullying or bullying that is not physical, but emotional, involving an adult is a little bit tricky because sometimes it can make the problem worse if the person handling the bullying doesn't know how to handle it well. And so one of the things you really want to avoid is getting both the bully and the victim in the same room to sort of mediate it or talk it out. What that does is it, first of all, intimidates the victim very much because they're sitting there with that bully. They've got to talk about it right in front of the bully. And then the bully figures out through this conversation how upset the victim has been over it because they're delving into all the details. And that's just going to give that bully more power over that child. And this is not the greatest way to handle it. The best way to handle it, and I've done this at my center with kids, I can tell you that it works, is to have an adult let the bully know that you see him and you got your eyes on him and you want it to stop. And even if, you know, some teachers, administrators, or people who work with children think that you need to have a full, you know, investigation with evidence that something is happening with somebody, you don't. You can go over and say, I'm sensing something that's going on over here and I don't like it. And look them right in the eye, I don't like it. And that's literally all it'll take. And if the minute they know that there are adults who are kind of, you know, zoning into what's going on or the vibe of whatever that is, or that there might be some bullying going on, and that adult is watching that child, that's pretty much all you really need to do to really get most kids to stop. Some are going to keep doing it anyway. There's always going to be exceptions to this. But that's really, really powerful. And it can be anybody in the school system can do that and just be like, I got my eyes on you. I see what you're doing. I don't like it. It needs to stop. Not yelling, not screaming, none of that, but just let them know that you know, and that can be enough. If it gets overblown, then what can happen is that, and again, it depends on the seriousness of the bullying. If it's minor bullying and it's not a big deal yet in terms of the situation, you're nipping it before it gets too big. These strategies can help. If it gets to where it is a significant situation where it's gone on and they keep ratcheting up the levels of bullying, 100%, you absolutely need to talk to an adult. And I will say to kids, if you've tried to, you know, tell the person to stop and you tried to get away from, we call it talk, walk, and ask. If you've done those things where you've told the person to stop, you try to get away from them and they're following you and they're continually bothering you and it won't stop, tell adult after adult after adult after adult so that it does stop. So there's different levels here. If you can pick up, hopefully we pick up what I'm saying here. There's different levels of bullying and it can be handled hopefully before it gets to that really bad stage where it's a major crisis. So I hope you found this helpful. Please pick up Bully Busting and Managing Meanies. It's available on Amazon.com. I'll put a link to it too below in the description. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please hit like and hit the subscribe button and we'll see you next time.